The shelter comprises only one cavernous room, so no one can escape the sight of what is about to happen. He stands beside the empty steel crate that used to hold the food supplies. The crate that he has turned into an altar. The crate that he has carved with holy symbols and ruins. The symbol on top of it is the chief symbol of their beliefs. A circle of 8 faceless figures facing each other, joined by the hands and feet. The carving is dark red from the blood of the children who came before, like a flower blooming in late summer. The boy is laid atop the altar and held still by 2 of the soldiers. The man stands over the crying child and raises his knife. Serrated, military issue, nasty looking. "By the grace of the whole, by the Lord who nurtures us until we have grown, we offer this life. We offer it to keep Elnaris at bay, to show him that our will is greater than his. We will not blanch in the face of this tyranny. We will resist him with every breath. We are the whole, one body, one mind, one voice." The crying of the mother almost drowns out the prayer. The knife descends and the child screams. He screams and screams for what seems like hours. Finally he falls silent. His blood runs down the steps, adding to the stains left by the other 2 children. 5 more, I think to myself. 5 more than me. I look down at the blade in my hand, squeezing it reassuringly. 5 more. Then they get to meet you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the long hiatus, but we're back with an interesting story today. Because today we're talking about the Red Saints. This book is brought to us by our old friend Matt Waterhouse, who did one of my favorite books of the year, The Eye of the Universe. Now we're going to start, as we always do, with the characters, and we can break the characters into 2 categories based upon who they interact with, or more accurately, whose side they're on. And we're going to start with our main character, who is technically unnamed. We're going to call him Mr. White, but he actually has another name in the book. He's known as Elnaris, which is basically the devil. But Mr. White is mostly unaware of this, at least for the beginning. Now, who is Mr. White? Well, Mr. White is a former soldier. He grew up basically an orphan, and he's done his best to keep most people at a distance his entire life. He is also a mass murderer. The introduction I just read is his origin as to how he became such a mass murdering individual. Mr. White has done his best to keep pretty much everyone at bay, but he's failed a little bit in that he has a kind of friends with benefits relationship with another soldier named Kyla. Kyla is a gunner on the ship Nagasaki, which is one of the places where Mr. White has served in the past. He's also served as a pilot. He seems to have a long, storied military career, except for when he just goes for the drifter murder hobo angle. He has a few other friends from the military, but very few of them are brought up as much as Miss Kyla. Now we're going to get into a truly interesting character in Saint Janus. Now, to understand Saint Janus, we need to understand a little bit about the religion of the whole. The religion has people known as saints. They wear armor all the time, which covers them from head to toe, masks their voice, pretty much everything about them. You don't know if they're male or female. And the point of this is to convince other people that they have evolved past the need for gender. Sounds familiar. Janus, as a saint, is kind of like not exactly an aristocrat, kind of a ruling elite if you were to mix nobility with the papacy. So kind of like a noble pope, except there are other popes above him. Janus's job has been to track the Pale Man, which is our unnamed character, Mr. White, who he constantly refers to as Elnaris, which is the devil in the Whole's religion. He is accompanied by his engineer Job, or Job, depending upon how you wish to pronounce it, and Freya, his ship's pilot. And over the past 15 years, he has been hunting for Elnaris, or Mr. White, since the incident at Golden Shore, which was covered in the introduction. Our final major player in this story is Commodore Hugh, and Commodore Hugh is the commander of the Sol Fleet, or Sol being our solar system. The Soul Fleet typically defends the Hole whenever it, for lack of a better term, pisses off somebody else who just doesn't want to deal with them anymore. So let's get into the meat of things, otherwise known as the story. Now, it's important to know that the book is broken up, and one chapter is done as Mr. White, and the next chapter is done as Lord Janus. We start with Mr. White as he arrives on Williamson Colony, basically pulling his drifter stick. It gives you a good feel of the colony following him around as he purposefully looks for the different stores. You meet a few aliens, you meet a girl who's selling gyoza, which he buys from, and beer, and you finally arrive at an area where there's the Church of the Hole. And here's where we start to get a really good feel for how much Mr. White doesn't like the Hole, and we also begin to get the feel there might be something not quite right with Mr. White. As at the end of this chapter, he says he starts to feel the itch. Next, we flip to Lord Janus, who has arrived at Williamson Colony tracking the Pale Man, our main character. And he is showing up because the church on Williamson has, let's say, experienced a scene out of a 90s anime. Elfen Lied, for those of you who are cultured. Basically, a devastating scene of mass murder has occurred within the church. And this isn't the first time this has happened, but this is the first time it's happened on Williamson. Janus has been following Mr. White around the entire galaxy to basically every place Mr. White has gone to and murdered a whole bunch of people who were members of the Hole. Our first impression of Lord Janus is they're stern. They follow the rules exactly. They're on a mission and they will never be deterred from that mission. Without going into too much detail about the murder scene, there is one thing that needs to be noted, and that is that 8 of the people who were killed are arranged in the symbol of the Hole in one of the rooms. 5 of them are male, 3 of them are female, matching the children sacrificed at Golden Shore, letting us know that it was our main character who did this. It becomes apparent very quickly that Janus is a little bit obsessed with catching Alnaris. And let's be honest, who wouldn't be a little obsessed after 15 years of tracking the same person? And the murder scene just keeps getting worse as they keep finding bodies all over the church, in the elevator shafts, in private quarters, all over the place. We switch back to Mr. White, who has satisfied his itch and has now gone to a local dive bar, where he encounters some of his old friends, including Kyla. He also encounters an old enemy named Dradic. Dradic is not a good person by any stretch of the imagination, but he is a member of the Whole Church. He was removed from military service a couple of times in the past for, and I want to be YouTube friendly with this, improper treatment of wartime prisoners, particularly young female prisoners. Mr. White is a little upset to see that he's not only back in the army, but is going to be going on this particular mission to defend Williamson Colony. He decides that Dradic is not going to be participating in this particular military maneuver. We cut back to Lord Janus, who is talking with his old mentor, Lord Roman, who, much like Lord Janus, is encapsulated in armor, so we know very little about them, other than that he was the one who was with Lord Janus when they went to Golden Shore. It was in fact during Lord Janus's training that they went to Golden Shore. Janus has been noticeably obsessed with this incident and with the Pale Man for most of his life, and his conversation with Lord Roman doesn't do much to assuage his fears. It seems that Alnaris is becoming much more active in his murder sprees wherever he goes, and Janus is determined, absolutely obsessed with making sure it doesn't happen again, to the point that Janus goes back to his memories of Golden Shore. Now, when I say goes back to his memories, I don't mean he sits and reminisces. His armor actually records everything that happens around him, allowing him to relive moments with perfect 360-degree remembrance. And he spends a great deal of time in Golden Shore, which I'm not going to go into because it's rather bleak and would probably get me kicked off of YouTube. Unfortunately, Job, who was the ship's engineer, happens to see Lord Janus outside of his armor shortly after this. Now, you and I might not think this is such a big deal, but apparently in the whole it is a capital offense to see a saint without their armor. Job submits meekly to the execution, but it doesn't go over so well with the pilot of the ship, Freya, who is noticeably disturbed at this fact. They've been traveling together for a very long time, and Janus not only swiftly executed Job, he comes into the command room with his blood still all over his armor. A definite faux pas if there ever was one. While Job was getting his, apparently Mr. White was also getting his, not only with his old military friend, but with the girl who sold him gyoza at the beginning of the book. A mass murderer he might be, but as we all know, mass murderers get all the girls. This is where we find out a little bit about exactly what Mr. White is capable of. As post-activity, the gyoza girl starts going over the various scars that cover Mr. White's body, stopping on one that is particularly deep and particularly nasty. This, it turns out, was a self-inflicted scar, which he will not talk about. It's the one he did to himself in order to escape notice at Golden Shore when the Saints arrived. Basically, ritualistic suicide without the completion. Well, this seems to trouble the gyoza girl once she discovers that there was a murder that took place and that Mr. White might be one of the suspects, which she immediately goes to the church and tells them. St. Janus actually gets a chance to grill this girl, and he thanks her for her contribution to his knowledge, but secretly he's condemning her in his own mind. He does promise to protect her as he hurries off to capture Alnaris, who it turns out is now a member of the Soul Fleet, going off to defend Williamson from the incoming Caliphate. This also flies directly in the face of Janus's orders to keep everybody on lockdown. Before Janus can even leave the planet, however, the gyoza girl is unfortunately and savagely murdered. A murder which he lays square at the feet of Mr. White, even though Mr. White is no longer on the planet and he knows it. And this will bring you to about the 40% point of the book. There's a lot more details I didn't go into, but around about here is where things start to pick up and get exciting. So let's get into my thoughts on this. The first thing that strikes me is the similarity to the story Moby Dick. Janus is absolutely obsessed with catching Alnaris, to the point of self-destruction. He does things that are blatantly harmful and detrimental, it seems, in his pursuit of this one individual. And it is completely understandable that he would want to catch Mr. White. Some of the steps that he takes are a little bit beyond draconian, and easily could be construed as harming the faith as a whole. The book also has quite a bit of gore, at least at the beginning. I know I'm beginning to increasingly say this, but there seems to be an awful lot of just visceral gore in a lot of the books I've been reading lately. I'm not chiding it at all. It can be used very effectively. And in this book in particular, it's used very effectively to show you just how dangerous Mr. White actually is. But we also come to the inevitable comparison to his other work, The Eye of the Universe. And I have to say, I still like The Eye of the Universe better. This is certainly a fun story, and I certainly do recommend you read it. But Eye of the Universe has a better atmosphere. Being able to see both sides of this play out makes it a little bit less mysterious. But with that being said, I will leave you to your reading. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my review. If you enjoyed it, you can find others on my YouTube, BitChute, and Odyssey channels. If you are an independent author and would like a chance at having a review, I have master lists on Minds, Gab, and Twitter pinned at the top of my feed. Please leave your book name, the way you would like readers to contact you, and a place where you can be reached and your work can be found. Thank you.